Hi everyone, it's Karen Tamir here for Live with Prima with a mixed media denim journal cover tutorial. Enjoy! I started by creating texture on the cover of the Vintage Vanity Finnabair denim journal. I used some light paste and a wood grain stencil to create texture using the silicone brush. I started adding some texture in one corner of the journal and then drying it in between so I won't muck up the paste. Then I added some more texture at the bottom and on the sides. Once the wood grain pattern was dry, I used some texture paste antique silver crackle and added it in the middle of the journal cover. I used a palette knife and added it quite roughly onto the background to create texture. Then using the same palette knife, I just pushed it down to create this raised texture by adding more paste and then patting it down. While the silver crackle was drying, I took a plastic butterfly that I found in the dollar store and I started covering it with white gesso. I gave it quite a few layers, I think 3 layers, until it was thick enough and I covered all the blue plastic because I wanted to alter it. Once the butterfly was sufficiently covered in gesso and on the last layer before drying it, I added some silver microbeads onto the butterfly and then I added some zinc colored glass beads onto it to create texture onto the butterfly. The leftover beads from the butterfly were added to the front cover of my journal as the silver crackle was still wet. Once the silver texture was dry, I started spraying color bloom on the background. First I sprayed with Fairy Pond, then with Brimstone Wings, and finally with Dragonfly Blue. Then I sprayed the butterfly with the same exact colors. After spraying, I realized that the thickness of the journal absorbed a lot of the ink, so I sprayed some more and then I tried to experiment and added some wild raspberry along with the Fairy Pond and the Brimstone Wings, and then I changed my mind. I didn't like how it looked, so I diluted it with some white color bloom and then added Brimstone Wings and Fairy Pond color bloom again. Next, I wanted to add some white gesso to lighten up the background. However, I realized that the beads were a little bit loose and I couldn't apply the gesso really well. So what I did is I took some soft matte gel medium and I applied it quite thickly onto the background to seal the beads into the paste. I added it in a very thick manner, not only because I wanted the beads to be stuck onto the background, but it also gave it a really cool texture. Then I took some of the same colors, Brimstone Wings and Fairy Pond Color Bloom sprays, and I just sprayed them on top of the wet gel, and it gave a really cool effect. Then I realized that I wanted to do the same effect on the butterfly, so I added the gel very thickly onto the butterfly and sealed all the beads onto the background. Of course, while it was still wet, I sprayed the same two colors, Brimstone Wings and Fairy Pond Blue, onto the butterfly. Then I sprayed Magic Stone Color Bloom spray onto the edges to define the borders of the butterfly and make them stand out. Because the gel was so thick, I had to let it stand and dry overnight. The next day, the background was fully dry and I used some Color Bloom Magic Stone spray to add some splatters onto the background. I took the Prima heart locket pendant and I cut a piece of its packaging to add as a dome to seal the heart. Then I added some Prima Junkyard findings, heart gears, and a little jean button, and I glued them with Prima heavy gel. I wanted to have some loose beads inside the dome, so I added some silver microbeads and zinc glass beads inside to match the rest of the background. And then I used some of the soft gel medium to glue the plastic dome onto the heart. Now it was time to assemble the composition. I used some soft gel to glue the butterfly first. And then I used heavy gel to glue the heart to make sure that it stays in place. I also glued a small jeans plate from the Junkyard Fighting collection that says Bliss. Finally, I glued some more jeans buttons around the layout to just add some more interest, and I glued them using the heavy gel. I wanted the metals on the layout to blend into the background, so I sprayed them with a little bit of the same color bloom sprays I had used before. Then I opened up the color bloom, and using a paintbrush I put some of the ink on each of the metals to just stain it a little bit so it blends into the background. The Magic Stone color bloom with a paintbrush and painted underneath the butterfly on all the edges to create a darker shadow behind it, so it would make the butterfly stand out. I wanted to make my butterfly a little bit brighter, so I took out my Finnabair metallic acrylic paints and added them to the butterfly. First I added the green gold opal magic, and then I used the green olive. After that I added a little bit of emerald green, and finally I added some antique silver to just blend it all into the background.